Welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah. As always, I am delighted to be back with you after a little bit of a gap between episodes. Just scheduling things, not a big deal. Nothing to report, just the way the schedule played out this time. And allergies. So had planned on doing this yesterday, and then I sneezed about 75 million times, and I thought my head was going to pop off. Let's get this episode started before I start telling you all these crazy, sneezing stories. As always, as I start an episode, if you have not done so already, please do like, follow, and subscribe on whatever platform you're either listening to or watching the episode on. That really does help us, gets the podcast out to more readers such as yourselves. You can also support the podcast in a financial way if you are of a mind to by going to gsmcpodcast.net. When you're there, you can leave us a tip of some sort. That really does help. It helps not only this podcast, but the network as a whole. Gets more content out to more people. And your support, as I always say, is greatly appreciated. Whatever form that support takes, we appreciate everything that you have done over the years to help support the podcast, the network, everything. How are you? I hope that you are not suffering from allergies, although it is that time of year. So many things are blooming. And yesterday I was good. I was doing great until about 3 o'clock. And then I started to sneeze, and I sneezed until I finally remembered that I did in fact have allergy pills. I thought I was out. And I took those about 9. It was about 6 hours of sneezing. Not that you need all the gory details, but I love to overshare. But the weather has been lovely. Not as warm as it normally is this time of year, but beautiful sunny days. And the sky has been absolutely showing off the last week or so with amazing sunsets. So every night when I walk the dogs, I take way too many pictures of sunsets. Do I need that many pictures of the sunset? No, but also, yes, absolutely. I need as many pictures of sunsets as I can possibly get, and I will continue taking more and more pictures of sunsets because they make me happy. Life here has been trucking along as usual, teaching, having some great lessons with kids, enjoying my students as always, spending time with the hubby. We had a friend from California who was here a while back, so we spent time with him. I think I may have mentioned that in the last episode, but it was really nice to see him. This is his, I think, 3rd trip to Portugal. So it's kind of fun to see what he thinks each time he returns, what he's noticed that's different, or what he does that's different from the previous times that he has been here. But it's always nice to see him, and he always makes a point to stop in our area, even when he's going lots of other places. So I hope that you are doing well, but we, of course, are here to talk about books. And today's book is historical fiction, although mid-90s, that's 30 years ago. Can we consider that historical fiction? We're going to, because we just are. But the book is Scabmuggers by Yvonne Martinez. Let me go ahead and give you the description of this book. For anyone interested in the intersection of feminism and politics comes this inspiring, based on a true story tale of fighting back against sexism in the labor movement, set against the backdrop of Harvard in the 1990s. As soon as courses at Harvard begin, Anna, a white female, finds herself being stalked by Aaron, a black male classmate. Word quickly gets out to the rest of the cohort, but not wanting to get anyone kicked out, Anna refuses to name names. With their program director insisting there's nothing she can do to intervene if no one will name the perpetrator, the class becomes engulfed in a campaign to protect Anna that splits the group into 2 camps. Some of the men join the women to fight the harassment. Some of the women join the harassers. In short order, the conflict becomes a fight for power that divides along sex, race, LGBTQ, and class lines, mirroring the heartbreaking history of the labor movement and serving as a precursor to our current political landscape. A galvanizing behind-the-scenes look at the labor movement of the 1990s, Scabmuggers is ultimately a triumphant tale of women's empowerment. Anna and her friends may be outnumbered, but they won't go down without a fight. And so, as you heard, that is the description of Scabmuggers. And this is, as it said, Harvard in the 1990s. It is based on a true story. It is based on Yvonne's own experiences in this program at Harvard. She will talk about that. And a couple of things about this. First, I know some things about the labor movement, about the history of the labor movement in this country. I was a history major. I love historical fiction. I do know a few things, but it is a lot of history and a lot of movements and people and different things happening in different parts of the country and lots of just a lot of details. So I knew some things, didn't know others. Learned a few more while reading this book. So if you are interested in the history of the labor movement, you will learn some of that in this book. But even beyond that, it is in some ways a microcosm of that movement, because we see how, unfortunately, as with so many movements, there are often divisions within groups that are working toward something bigger. There's often sexism and racism and classism and all of the isms, really. There's homophobia, everything. People seem to be naturally inclined, unfortunately, to divide into us and them. And this book is no different. And so you go in maybe expecting one thing, although not after you listen to this interview. Not a lot of spoilers, but that was in the description of the book. So you know going in that you are going to be going to this class with this group of people at Harvard, but quickly sides will be taken, lines will be drawn, conversations will be had, and it's just a really interesting, sometimes disheartening look at the way we divide and the way intersectionality comes together in so many different ways, not only in this story, but throughout history, throughout the history of different movements, etc. So it's a really interesting look through that lens. You've got the story itself, but you've also got that lens of division and intersectionality and just the way people tend to create groups no matter where they are. And what are the ramifications? What plays out after situations like this? What does that mean? This book takes place 31 years ago. What does that mean for today? Today's labor movement, today in general, things that are going on in the news today. And Yvonne is going to talk about a lot of that. So let's let her. Again, the book is Scabmuggers. The author is Yvonne Martinez. Hi, Yvonne. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you here, and I am excited to talk to you about the book Scabmuggers. But before
Mhm.
we do that, if you would take just a moment to introduce yourself so my listeners can get to know you a little bit.
Okay, my name's Yvonne Martinez. I'm a retired labor negotiator and labor organizer. Fourth generation Utahn. My family came here over 100 years ago to work in the sugar beets. My great grandfather was killed by the Mormons as the notorious Millard Bandit. I tell you
Mm,
that story because it centers me in the whole struggle of labor. They were starving in the labor camp where they were living, and he broke into a mercantile to get salt, pork, and flour, the basics
yeah.
of tortilla, so they wouldn't starve. Then my family moved to LA when I was a child, and I grew up there, and then went to college in the Northwest,
Okay.
to University of Washington. My first job out of college was in a law firm, and we were so badly paid, we were eligible for public assistance. I had student loans, kids, a new husband, and we had to organize in order to and actually the boss was a jerk and an
Mm,
asshole. To edit that
hmm
out. But and so it took us a long time, and we mobilized and we organized and we won, and then I went to work for unions.
Okay. Okay. I can only imagine that moving from Utah to LA must have been a little bit of a culture shock.
It definitely was. It definitely was. And that was the precise point. My stepfather didn't want us to grow up in Utah. My mother's family had been there over 100 years. They,
Yeah.
you know, made their accommodations with the Mormons, but my stepfather wasn't having it. He was an immigrant from coastal Mexico, and he knew that LA would be a better place for us, and actually it was.
Okay, interesting.
Mhm.
Thank you for that introduction. Can you
Sure.
give an overview of Scabmuggers?
Scabmuggers takes place at Harvard University. 30 trade unionists from around the world. It's an annual executive program, several months long, where we come together to deliberate about the future of the labor movement. And at the time in the US, there were only 15% of the country organized into unions. And so we got cross-cultural information from people all over the country, South Africa, Japan, Montreal, I mean, everywhere, and all over the United States. And within our class, we had the spectrum of left to right, and one of our classmates was being stalked by another classmate. And he was set up on a bet by a classmate from Australia.
Mm.
And so the university wouldn't do anything about it because the classmate didn't want to name names because we don't do that.
Hmm.
And so the class got engulfed in a campaign to fight for her, and it became a left-right fight from process-oriented legal workers and or process-oriented people against just downright bullies who thought they could just bull us over. So we organized. Some of the men, some of the women joined the men. Remember, there are only 6 women and 24 men, and some of the men joined our fight. So
Hmm.
it was what happened during that whole time.
Yeah. You can hear as Yvonne gives the introduction and her own experience that she really went to this program at Harvard with certain expectations. Of course, she did. And some of those expectations, I'm sure, were met in many ways, but in other ways, there was a lot of maybe disappointment, a lot of unmet expectations, and you can just hear in her experience that she wishes that things might have been different, that it didn't have to be this exercise in division or this microcosm, this lens, whatever you want to call it, showing the division that so often happens in groups, even when they're coming together for a joint purpose to learn from one another, to learn together. But we're going to go ahead and take our first break of this podcast. When we come back, why did Yvonne sit down to write this book, to write about that experience? You're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to work, cause my boss is a jerk, and I'm not even that paid. I need a change in my life, cause I don't feel alive, and there's nothing that makes me happy. Hold my beer for a minute, I'm about to quit my job, cash in for a ticket. I'm going on a trip and I don't plan to visit. I'm gonna stay there till I feel like I'm winning, and this is just the beginning. I need a big change, help me feel like living. I need a big swing, home runs I'm hitting, and I'll never look back, moving on till I get it all. And we all got dreams, we all want things, but what you gonna do for it? How you gonna move for it? What you gonna be? And do you believe you can do anything?
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with author Yvonne Martinez. This is your second and final reminder to, if you would like to support the podcast in a financial way, you can do so by going to gsmcpodcast.net. There you can leave us a donation of some sort. It helps this podcast, it helps the network, it gets this podcast especially out to other readers such as yourselves. It is always greatly appreciated. Before the break, Yvonne was sharing her experience, the inspiration for this book, her time spent at Harvard, and how that experience really affected her. Let's go ahead and return to the conversation with Yvonne. So this is a fictionalized account of your experience. What was the impetus for you to actually just to write it out?
Well, after we went through all that, I got back. I was living in Portland at the time, mid-career, as a labor negotiator and labor organizer. I went to I went to Harvard. I'm working class, so I had to work my way through school, and I thought, oh my God, I'll get a chance to just read and study and think. And I was really looking forward to this time of libraries and where I
Mm,
didn't have to wait for books or hide them or whatever. I just was looking forward to it. But that's not what happened. And so when I got back, I thought nobody is going to believe me. Nobody's going to believe what we had to go through and that those bullies exist. I know they existed because they exist. I
yeah.
encountered them in my life, but they weren't in my life at the time. So I came home and I just wrote it all down because I thought nobody's going to believe this. So I wrote it all down. I wrote every character down. I wrote all the events down, and then I went to graduate school and I put it away. It was
Hmm.
just for my own, just like, yeah, that happened.
Yeah.
Um, and then I went to graduate school and submitted it as a master's project thesis. And my Cornell professor, loved it, said, you should send this out. This is good. People need to hear this. And I was working, I was organizing strikes, I was busy. And so I did send it to a few places, but I couldn't find a home for it. And I didn't
Mm.
really have time to, I mean, the one guy wrote back and said, are you a socialist? And I'm like, oh, okay, this is where we're going. This
Yeah,
is
because
like,
that's the
okay,
salient point here.
yeah, yeah, like what, hello. And so then I just continued to work and eventually moved to the Bay Area for work. And then then Trump got elected. I retired and I thought, okay, let's try to find a home for this book now because I mean, this story needs to go out. So I tried again. And this time I thought I'd write it as a play. And so because I thought it was probably more likely to get seen as a play. And then the pandemic happened, and then I still continued, and then all the theaters were closed. I mean, we have so many theaters closed here, and so there was like nobody taking new work. And so I said,
Hmm.
okay, well, so I had changed it from a screenplay. I had to kill off like, I don't know, a whole bunch of people. That's why it's fictionalized because I had to
Okay.
combine people and eliminate people. It was hard.
Yeah.
And then that was going nowhere as a play. So then somebody said, yeah, put it in a novel, get it out there. So that was a novel. And which was good because it helped again crystallize it.
Yeah.
And then I met my director. She said, this is a great story. We should do a play. I said, a play? Of course we do. You have a play? I said, yeah, it's a play. It's like, okay, so that's where we are. Um,
Well,
so
at this point, you are probably so very familiar with everything that happens in this story, but it's gone through
well,
so many
so many
iterations.
iterations, right? Well, I'm also the executive producer of it, right? So I'm funding it, right, with my pension and some money from my real estate, and I'm just like, so I'm in the sort of like the production phase of it, like you've got to get the actors and you've got to I mean the director is great. She's knows everybody in the Bay Area film play what's the word, dramatic, stage
Hmm.
industry here. So that's just been amazing.
Yeah.
But I'm like, so I haven't really, I've written it and I've done some edits, but I know when we go into rehearsals at the end of this month in May, there'll definitely be more like back in the story part of it.
Yeah. It's told in first person point of view, so it's told
Hmm.
from Simone's point of view. Can you talk a
Yeah.
little bit about her as the narrator of the story? What about her do you think will resonate with readers?
Um, it is told by her, but I guess she kind of moves it, but she's not the heroine in my opinion. The heroine in the story is Anna,
Hmm.
because she's this working class, or she's not. Most of us had been like heads of unions or led strikes or done big campaigns, and so that was kind of what we did, right?
Yeah.
I think people would resonate because people who care about like, wait a minute, did he just say that? Isn't that illegal? I mean, don't
Mm,
we fight against that? I mean, wait a minute, we're not going to just let that go, are we? And then
right.
so it's like that sort of sense of like, you know, I mean, there's a conversation between Simone and Jack where he says, "Oh, muscle's all you need," and she reminds him that he's from Australia and that, oh God, I'm gonna forget his name. Famous like activist in the co Harry Bridges is an Australian, and it wasn't just muscle. You had to
Mm,
organize, you had to build power. And I said, yeah, you don't, it's not just muscle. You need to build power in other ways
yeah.
by organizing. So it's like this whole tension the whole time. You're just gonna so I think people who care. I just did I do the Moth Story Hour, so I just did a Moth piece
Yeah.
on Cesar Chavez and the revelations, and it's
Hmm.
uh, it's like the inspiration that people have when they know that there's something that they have to do, and they don't have to be defeated by the events, that there's some hope by
Hmm.
organizing other people that you can build power and reclaim your dignity and respect, and that you have a right to demand it. And I think people will hopefully find that in the piece. And
Yeah.
I hope they'll also find it some resonance, because when Trump got elected, I said like there's like we've elected Jack, right? It's like
Mm,
this whole just bully boy, just top to bottom disrespect. Like, I mean, look at where we are.
yeah.
Many of us face the real possibility that we could be snatched up off the street by armed and masked agents of the government, right?
Yeah.
Synagogues and mosques are being firebombed. Our bodies are under Orwellian control. It's
Yeah.
just, queer trans bashing. It's just when you put it all together, it just is this whole, it's a whole reason why we need to reclaim the things that like give us the spirit to fight.
Yeah. Yvonne just gave so many examples of things that maybe give us the spirit to fight. That's what she said, give us the spirit to fight. And what gives us that spirit is going to be different for everyone, but there are certainly no shortage of examples and things to hold up and things that may give you a spirit to fight. There's so many reasons. And like I said, so many examples. So if you've been given this spirit, what was it that caused it for you? What was it that inspired you? What are you fighting for? Maybe what are you fighting against? But definitely, what are you fighting for? We're going to go ahead and take our second break of this episode. When we come back, Yvonne's experience and how it felt for, well, in this case, me as the reader, because I went into it with expectations, just like Yvonne went to Harvard with expectations. I went into this book with expectations, and then there's a slightly different experience for the reader. You are tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with Yvonne Martinez. Before the break, Yvonne was giving numerous examples of injustice, the things that inspire people to fight. Maybe they have inspired you to fight, but she was giving lots of examples of those. Let's go ahead and return to the conversation with Yvonne. And it's something you said earlier was when your experience, you were so excited to be at Harvard, to have access to books, to have access to this knowledge, to these classes, and then to have to fight. That's how it felt as a reader, because you go in thinking, oh, this interesting experience. They're going to be at this 3 month or several month program, and then it's just immediately there's divisions, and that you get so many examples of intersectionality and the way the people come together and divide, and it just feels like, ugh, can we not just have this moment
Right.
of learning from each other?
Right, right. And I actually brought my knitting. I mean, it's like there's a moment where, and I don't know if it's as clear because it's hard to do this with a play that used to be a
Yeah.
novel that used to be a screenplay.
Yeah.
Is that like, do we have to do this here? Like, is this like this is what we have to deal with all the time, like back, in the world, right? Like in the real
Hmm.
world, right? And
Yeah.
and it's like that decision where you decide you're going to have the fight or you decide you're not going to have the fight.
Hmm.
And of course, we decide to have the fight. And
Yeah.
some people decide not to have the fight. They just opt out and just do whatever they're going to do. But
Yeah.
we did it. We decided to.
And something else that for me resonated with Anna is that at the beginning, from the very beginning, we meet her and you can tell that she's got this feeling of a little bit of imposter syndrome. Like, yes, I'm here, but I don't
Yeah.
have that experience that
Hmm.
some of the rest of you have. Should I be here?
Right.
Why
Right.
is my voice important?
Hmm. And
And
she was like very key because she was the sort of everyday woman that I would meet on work at the work site. Like they had this germ of like that they want to fight, but I mean, it's like it has to be a transition. It has to be an arc in their development as an activist. And I think, and she had it. It was organic. I mean, we would make fun of her because of the food. She was always bringing food, and it was like, why are you feeding these brutes, right? And it's like so
yeah,
it was, but sort of seeing how she sees how she develops and sort of sees
yeah.
herself for as the activist that truly she was.
Hmm. Obviously, this was your experience in the 90s, so it's set in that time period. But how
Mhm.
would you write this differently if you were writing it as a contemporary story?
Wow. Geez. I mean, I'd pick an institution. I wouldn't have to go far. I mean, every institution right now in this country is being bashed. I mean, maybe I'd be a reporter in a news in a newsroom, or I'd
Hmm.
be a teacher in a classroom whose curriculum is being all chopped up. I'd be a librarian in a library where all the books are being banned. I'd be
Yeah.
in a hospital where the INS is hauling off my patients. I mean, there are just so many places where you could tell the story and it would be the same story.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is disheartening. I mean, that would be the
Mm.
same story in so many places. So, from that, how does this story, do you think, reflect the broader history of the labor movement?
Oh, good question. I wrote an essay about that recently. It's part of the title is the chickens have come home to roost for the U.S. labor movement. From the very beginning, the code of the history of slavery or the how do you say this right? From the very beginning, the legacy of slavery was built into the labor code
Yeah.
because they excluded domestic workers and agricultural workers who were mostly black folks. And
Yeah.
so already it embedded it and the leadership was white and male, reflected the broader power structure. And historically, when it had an opportunity to bring people in to like broaden its base to really reflect who actually worked here and lived here,
Hmm.
even from the revolution, in the country's revolution, they turned away. In the Wobblies in the 20s, they were organizing everybody regardless of craft or creed, religion, race. I mean, they were powerful, but the AFL at the time colluded with the government to do away with them, and they went after the Wobblies and just wiped them out. But the Wobblies were pretty powerful. So there was an opportunity. And then in the 50s, there was the Red Scare. And so all the unions who were organizing leadership of color were, they expelled 11 unions, the CIO did, and there was jailings and maimings and union members going after union members. So in its history, the labor movement is no different than any other institution, but it's had opportunities to change course, but it hasn't.
Hmm.
And so now we have less than 10% organized. We have less than 10% of the country organized when you compare to other countries who have 40, 50% Western industrialized countries. The U.S. At its highest had 35% during
Okay.
World War II. Um, then you can sort of see the contrast. And the reason is because it's never been an inclusive movement.
Hmm.
There have been times in its history where it's been inclusive and it's been powerful, but it hasn't always been that way. And that's the legacy of what we have today. So this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity to build, like everybody else is having to build their institutions. And I don't know if it's up to the task.
Yes, the title Scabmuggers, for people who maybe aren't familiar with that term, can you unpack that a little bit?
Sure. Scabmuggers were turn of the century women, ethnic women, immigrants from Italy and Ireland and Eastern Europe. They were Syrians and Poles and Slavs, and these were women who were in these textile strikes at the turn of the century. And the scabmuggers would patrol the picket lines to make sure that the scabs didn't get past the picket lines, and they would find ways of deterring them.
Hmm.
So mug them.
Right.
Um, and they also protected the picketers and the strikers from the vigilantes that the bosses hired to harass the picketers and, to break the lines. And these women were, they traveled in groups, and they, when if they traveled in groups. They had cudgels in their corsets. They had pipes and 10 pins in their shawls. And if a police wagon came, they circled the wagon and to confound and confuse the police. And their cry was, take us all or take none of us.
Hmm.
So these were the scabmuggers, like the women and men in LA, New York, Chicago, Minneapolis, people who are surrounding the INS and places like that. That's who they are
Yeah.
today.
Before I read this book, I know I've heard the word scabmuggers, but I was trying to, without Googling it, I was trying to remember what I knew about it. And the answer was not a lot. So it was great to read about it in the book and to hear Yvonne's explanation. Maybe this is a word that you're familiar with. Maybe this is a group of people that you're familiar with, a piece of history that you are familiar with. Maybe it's new to you. That's what I love about historical fiction is that it inspires me to look things up, start reading things that I might not otherwise read. Not that my TBR needs more things added to it, but I do love to learn and learn new things, learn things that I might have forgotten. Maybe it's the same for you. But we're going to go ahead and take our next break of the podcast. When we come back, more about the legacy of these women, the Scabmuggers, and all who followed. What that legacy is even today. You're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back. Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with author Yvonne Martinez. Before the break, Yvonne was talking about the origin of the word scabmuggers, of the people who are the origin of that, and what an interesting and incredible group of women they were. Let's go ahead and return to the conversation with Yvonne. Never underestimate women. I mean, at that time they didn't have a lot of power, but these women certainly used what they
They
had and could
they
do.
did, and I think it's important to know that that's a legacy in this country, that women, especially, I mean, these women are like Latinas and Asian women and Black women now, but then they were ethnic women from other countries who were treated as those ethnic women are treated now. So it's like it's
Exactly.
in our history, it's in our DNA, it's in our who we are as people who struggle for fairness and respect and dignity.
Yeah. And they are so often the people that are left out of history. So to write their stories, to tell their stories is important.
Correct.
Yeah.
That was important about Harvard because I would not have known about the Scabmuggers because we the whole time we were reviewing and studying the lessons of the history, which is a bloody history here. I mean, I'm
Hmm.
not saying it was an easy thing, to fight back. It was hard. I mean, they
Yeah.
massacres, Ludlow, Aliquippa, all these places that they just mowed people down. So it was not an easy thing to do. I mean, I'm not underestimating that fight.
Yeah. Yeah. This is based on a lot of your own experiences. Was there any particular research that you did when you were writing?
Um, yes, I went back to look at I was sorry, I'm getting emails on here. Um, uh, uh, I went back to research the person who I was the national fellow for Jerry Worf. Jerry Worf was a an organizer from New York for the American Federation of State, County, Municipal Employees, and so he was an organizer, Jewish guy, and he fought corruption in the early trades. And I think it was the hospitality trades. So they kicked him out. And so then he went to go work for AFSCME, the American Federation of State, County, Municipal Employees. He was one of the early democratic socialists. He was
Mm,
one of the first people to sort of bring in and sort of cleaned up, all the sort of like, right wing, stuff that was going on in labor. And then he was instrumental in supporting one of the first and only white men to support a black-led struggle, and that was the sanitation strike. So when the sanitation workers went on strike in Memphis, he supported it. And so sort of his legacy in terms of who he was and what he represented and what he did was really important to me because when I looked at the whole historical arc of who was fighting and who was who was defending these fights that were important
hmm.
fights to have, then there are places where you can see that there are points in history where that happens. And so he
Yeah.
was with Dr. King at the church, when he made I've seen the mountaintop speech, and then, of course, the next day he was killed.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Right.
Again, names that we don't always know.
Right.
Um, yeah. What do you hope readers will take away from the book?
Hmm. Um, I think as we sort of face this sort of like mounting, I don't know what else to call it. I mean, uh, is this mounting pressure. You say fascism, and people are like, oh, it's not that bad. Well, kind of it is. Okay,
Yeah.
this is how it starts, right? And so as people face that and they face a way to resist instead of just hide, I hope people, one of the last speeches in the book, and I won't give everything away, but is from my South African colleague who is still around, which is incredible. I'm going to write to him. I mean, he's in South Africa. I don't know if he'll
Yeah.
come to the play, but I'm going to invite him.
Yeah.
And he said in this one of the speeches, the sort of final speeches, is that when we had no political rights in our lives, in our civic life, we learned democracy in our unions. So it
Hmm.
was like a place where they could come and meet and fight and figure out how they were going to move forward in this situation. So
Yes.
we need to find institutions and build institutions where we can be democratic and fight. And I hope people come away with the hope that that brings because they ultimately did prevail. And they ultimately did, they won their freedom, and I think we can too. I think people are just we don't have that tradition of fighting,
Right.
and we need to. I mean, we did, but now look what's happening to voting rights. Look what's happening to all these things.
Right.
So time for us to rebuild. And I guess the other thing I would say is that um, uh, uh, the character of Anna, who is a person who actually I don't know if she ever, well, there's a whole other story about that. But anyway, sh this is an everyday woman. So when I would go to work sites and we'd organize like strikes or in hospitals or in counties or whatever, these are the women who actually would be the power of it, right? At the end, she says, thanking me for teaching her how to fight, but I thank her for teaching me how to win because she really organized everybody underneath this whole thing. So I think every person has that in them, and given the opportunity and the chance and the encouragement, they can do it.
Yeah. Then I love Anna because she learns, she fights, she works, but she doesn't lose her compassion. She still feeds everyone, like she still has that nurturing side to her in the story.
Yeah,
Um,
she does. She does. And then when we go to the textile, the museum, and she sees these like pictures on the wall where she like sort of sees herself there. She sees
yeah.
what this is about. It made sense to her.
Yeah. Yeah. So the play is talk a little bit about when it's starting,
Uh,
the
it
run, the when it'll be running, etc.
It's running 3 Tuesdays in July, July 7th, 14th, and 21st. It'll be at The Freight in Berkeley, California. Nobody will be turned away. And anybody that's been on strike in the last year will be free. It'll be free for them. So
Nice.
we've got a lot of teacher strikes around here. So we're getting the word out as much as we can. We have equity actors who are celebrated locally, and it's going to be a wonderful, hopefully, production, and people will learn these lessons and this fight and be inspired to keep fighting.
Yeah, it's really exciting. I mean, congratulations on
Thank
you
you.
got the book out, but you've also got the play happening. So
No,
so many wonderful things.
who knew? I've been toiling away here after the pandemic thing. When is any of this going to get heard?
Yeah, yes. Earlier in the episode, Yvonne was talking about just how many iterations this story went through as she was working on it and why it went through all of those iterations. But I love that it is now both a book and a play, and then that play is in production. It will be not airing, sorry. It will be playing 3 nights in July, and that I just think is really exciting for this story that she just wrote down when she came back, and it has kind of taken on a life of its own. But that's really amazing how things work out sometimes. We're going to go ahead and take our final break of this episode. When we come back, what is Yvonne working on now? And I don't know the hours between midnight and 6 when she should be sleeping, but what is she working on currently? You're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back. Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and the conclusion of my conversation with author Yvonne Martinez. Before the break, Yvonne was talking about the play, which tells the same story as this book and is currently in preparation to open for its opening run in July, which is really, really exciting. But let's go ahead and return to the conversation with Yvonne. You've got plenty on your plate, but are you working on anything currently in terms of writing?
Um, Well, the thing that keeps like nagging at me, I mean, because of, once the production's done, there'll be some like, let down and, whatever. But
Yeah.
the project that keeps at me is about my great grandfather, just about the conditions that led up to,
Yeah.
I mean, they're pretty straightforward, but being recruited by the Utah and Idaho Sugar Company and just all that happened with the beets rotting and, just that whole thing. And just the other thing is that the what's the word the internal the trauma, the inherited trauma of that is
Hmm.
like destroyed my family. It's like,
Yeah.
we survived, but like internally there's just so much. I mean, they killed him and then they dragged him through town headless and then there was a
Ugh.
mob. This was 1922
Yeah.
and my grandmother was thrown in jail with her children and she lost a child and I mean just this whole compounded, traumatic,
Right.
generational. And so it's probably going to be the bravest book in that respect, because it really is going to, go there. So, and plus,
Yeah.
I'm just interested in it historically, what was going on,
Right.
and
Well,
you know, going back to Utah will be hard, but I guess I could
yeah.
do it.
Yeah, but that's humanizing history. So it's one thing to read about, oh, this happened, but to
Right,
read this happened to my family, and this
right,
is how it's continuing to create generational trauma,
right,
is really, well, it's not going to be easy, but it is important for a lot of
mhm,
people outside
right.
of even your family.
Right. And many of us who, because of who we are and because of what's happened to our peoples, I mean, have it. It's like there, right? Until we find the way to sort of like address it. It can be turned into something, even though some of it's so horrific, it's hard to imagine what it could be, but
Yeah,
something can change.
yeah, yeah. Um, have you always wanted to write, or did that come about just, I mean, later in your career, or how did it evolve?
Well, we're talking about family trauma. My family, um, there was a lot of trauma in my family. There was a lot of domestic violence. There was
Hmm.
alcoholism and mental illness, which I attribute to just all this unresolved. Um, and so I wrote down stuff just sort of like the play. It's like, yes, the toaster flew across the room. Yes, this happened and that. Because then after some horrible thing would happen, it would be like nothing happened. It was like, but yes, it did happen. So like I would
Yeah,
write it down just so like I know that happened. I,
yeah,
I mean, I'm not going to just be in denial about what I just witnessed. And so it just started that way. It just started just like, okay, I'm just going to write this for myself and I'm not going to show this to anybody else. And it was like my own little agency as a child to sort of just
hmm,
bear my own witness.
yeah. Wow. Um, do you have advice for someone who might have a story that they have that they, that they do kind of want to tell? What would you say?
I'd say find a writing teacher and a method that you trust. I studied in the basement of a writing teacher for years. Every weekend, I'd go there and bring pages and study. Tom Spanbauer, he's gone now, wrote Dangerous Writing. It was a class he taught. Who was the guy that wrote the Fight Club? I can't remember names now. Oh my
Oh,
God.
shoot.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, so find that, find it, and then just I wrote my first book in essays because I didn't have time. So I wrote one essay at a time over years.
Right.
And my first book was a Shonda Land endorsed book. And I just wrote it one, I could get an hour here, I could get an hour there, find a coffee shop, go there, between meetings, whatever I could do, I wrote it over
Yeah.
time. So find a method and then just follow it and then let it tell you what it's about.
No.
Yeah, let it
Yeah.
tell you what it's about.
Thank you. When you take time to read, do you have favorite authors and genres?
Right now, I like historical fiction, especially as close as it is to actually what happened that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, I'm also a docent in training at the Berkeley Rep, and so that's fascinating. So reading
Hmm.
screenplays or plays, we just did Arthur Miller's all my sons, with Jimmy Smits and Wanda de Jesus, and fascinating. So reading that and reading about him and what influenced Arthur Miller it was completely fascinating. So that's what I've been reading. So the next book I'm going to be reading is Tastes Like Cuba, and it's about a family in Cuba who stayed in a family in Miami and just how they reckoned with what happened 40 years in that interim.
Okay. Oh, wow. Yeah. If people want to know more about your books, your writing, website, if
Yeah,
you have one, any social media that
yes,
you're
I
acting
do.
on,
Just
you're active on.
Yvonne Martinez author, and you just put that in and it'll go to my page.
Okay, great. Yvonne, is there anything that we have not covered or that you wanted to make sure you highlighted during this time?
Um, I think you got it all. I think we got the Scabmuggers, we got the book, we got the stories, we got it, I think I'm looking at your list right here and I don't see anything else. Yeah, I think you covered it all.
Okay. Well, I want to say thank you for taking time out of your day because I know you're busy.
Okay.
So thank you for
Okay.
talking to me. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you too.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you again to Yvonne for joining me to talk about Scabmuggers, both in book form and in play form. There's so much excitement around this story. There's so many exciting things happening since the writing of this book, and just wish her the best of luck with everything. But if you are interested in the history of the labor movement, then this is maybe a book that you want to check out if you just like historical fiction in general and more recent historical fiction, because this is only 31 years ago. If you are interested in how communities, groups, people who should maybe be of like mind come together and often find more things that they disagree on than they agree on, this may be a book for you, as disheartening as that can feel sometimes, as painful as that can be sometimes to experience. But then there's some very good examples in this book, and maybe it's not always, as I was reading it, like I said in the interview, I did feel disheartened sometimes because of everything that was going on with this group of people. And yet it's so important to understand that even when people come together for a common purpose, they don't always agree and they don't always see things the same way, and the us and the them and the isms still exist. So what does that mean for us as groups who may need to come together for a common purpose, and what can we learn from stories like this as we go forward to fight whatever fight it is that we are facing? These things are important, and they're things to think about and things to consider. So thank you to Yvonne, not only for joining me, but for also telling this story and in multiple mediums, which is, as I said, very, very exciting. Thank you, as always, for joining me for this interview. I hope you'll join me for the next interview and the next episode, when I will be speaking with author Margot Elliott. You may know her as Julia Fine because she has written 3 speculative books under that name, speculative suspense horror books under Julia Fine, and she is shifting focus a little bit with this one. So she is writing under the pen name Margot Elliott, and this is Honeymoon Stage. If 1995 can be considered historical fiction, this is 2002. It's only 7 years later. I don't know where to draw the line. That feels a little strange to me, but this does start in 2002, goes until 2007, tells the story of a young woman who is living in Los Angeles and gets a job working on a reality TV show. Not in front of the cameras, but as a production assistant. And a lot of things happen. I mean, obviously we get a behind the scenes look into that time period and that world when reality TV was going through some interesting shifts and growing pains, and why that was. We get a little bit of romance because there is a love interest for Cassidy, and we get a little bit of mystery as well. So I hope that you will join me for that conversation with Julia on the next episode. In the meantime, of course, if you are a fan of this podcast and you have not done so already, please like, follow, and subscribe on whatever platform you're either listening to or watching the episode on. Leaving a nice review also helps the algorithm. All of these things help the algorithm, gets this podcast out to more readers such as yourselves, gets these books out to more people who may want to read them and may want to find new authors that they haven't heard of before. Or maybe they want to hear a conversation with an author they already know and love. But all of your help, all of your support gets this podcast out to more people. So thank you for that. Liking, following, subscribing, leaving a nice review, also following on social media. You can find the podcast on Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. As always, I love hearing from you, so find the podcast, ask me questions, tell me what you're reading, tell me what your plans going forward are reading. We're almost getting to summer. Do you have summer reading planned? Do you have new authors you want to try? You know I'm nosy. Come feed that nosiness. I really hope you're having a great week. I hope that you are enjoying some lovely weather, but not enjoying the allergies that often come with them. I apologize for how scratchy my throat is. I'm going to go drink more tea with honey and see if I can get that cleared up, but probably not. I've sounded like this all day. But I hope you're having a really great week. And as always, my hope is that you have so much time, more time than you even realized you had, to get yourself lost in a good book. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.
I never really know what's going on. Look at me sometimes.